Hello and welcome back to Inclusive Design 24 2021, brought to you with thanks to our Platinum supporters, Intopia, Fable, TPGI, ARC and Adobe, and our Gold supporter, Tetralogical. A reminder that you can follow all the action on Twitter by following the account ID24Conf, that's C-O-N-F. And if you have questions for our next presenter, please post them on Twitter with the ID24 hashtag. I'm greatly joyed to welcome our next guest host, Svea Siegman, someone I've known for many years and worked alongside in various forums. Svea, it's lovely to have you join us as a guest host. I'll leave it to you from here.
Thank you, Leonie. Next we have, excuse me, sorry about that. Next we have Donna Bungard talking about how project management empowers accessibility. I'll hand it over to you, Donna. Go ahead.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you everyone for joining us. I'm so thrilled to be speaking at ID24. I hope you've gotten to catch a lot of sessions. I know I've spent my morning listening to them on my other screen as well. There's amazing speakers and I'm honored to be here. So let's talk about accessibility from the project management perspective here. But first, who am I to be talking about it? Well, I'm Donna Bungard. On the screen are a bunch of logos of certifications from IAAP to various project management certifications, but all of this alphabet soup after my name just means that I'm really passionate about both managing teams to be successful and being inclusive. And you can't be inclusive without being accessible as well. A little history from me. As much as I've been working with accessibility for the last, I don't know, better part of a decade, I have been living most of my life. Growing up, I was the only person in my immediate family without a disability. So being and promoting and using accessible practices was never a matter of, oh, I should do this. It was a matter of, oh, my sister will not help carry groceries if I don't make sure she's able to hear me. My father cannot be, you know, a teenage me mooched off of to get $1 to go get a soda if I don't go up to the correct side of his body where he'd be able to perceive me. There are things about just living in a household and always being accessible so that way everyone can perceive and comprehend what you're trying to communicate that makes it just what you do to get by. And that's how it should be here. Accessibility is not an add-on, it's not an afterthought. Frankly, our whole industry of online and digital professionals are already accessible to devices that change shape. All we're doing here is making sure we're respecting a good 20, 25, 30 or so % of our population. So what we're going to talk about is a whole way of just baking this in. My goal is if we're going to make things just what we do, it needs to be baked into our entire process. And as management, we have the ability to make sure we're empowering our teams at every stage of the way. So that way it doesn't become an afterthought or something we have to be frantic over near the end. So first and foremost, we're assuming positive intent. You're here, you're listening, awesome. We are assuming positive intent from our teams. They want to be accessible. There's a lot of things going on, and we are going to assume that everyone is trying, and we're just looking for ways to make it easier, better, and again, baked in. So on my screen, you're going to see throughout, you'll be aware of throughout the presentation, there will be images of Wizard of Oz, because I cannot give a talk without a theme, just a kind of me thing. And this one, we are going to Oz together. So this is the gentleman outside of the Emerald City saying, go away. And why? Because if you have an inaccessible site, 20 to 25% of users are essentially being told to go away. I make the comment, or I've made the analogy before that it would be like going to your favorite coffee shop, right? And either you're not permitted in the door, or if you're allowed in the door, you have to order without actually being able to perceive the menu, and you have to get it right. Or maybe you can do all the ordering, but you're not permitted to pay. Something as simple as that is very much like the online experiences so many are experiencing every day. So an inaccessible site is shutting off your users. And that's just not respectful. Accessibility, I cannot state this enough. Accessibility, and I have a feeling in this, people, if you're coming here again, coming back to the assuming positive intent, I'm assuming you already know this, but putting it out there, your users, your digital users are already including people who are not neurotypical, who may identify as being disabled, individuals of every combination of factors exist. We all are out there and we all perceive it differently. And we need to respect all of those users. And by not being accessible throughout every stage of your process, you're not showing them the respect. This is not charity. This is respect. So as Dorothy's sitting here walking through the twister while Wizard of Oz is still in sepia tone, I want to mention that also I know that managers are juggling a lot. Right now, the world is understaffed. You know, everyone needs more people. There's so much to be done. People are exhausted and tired, and burnout is more at least talked about than ever, if not more experienced with COVID. We're all going through a lot. We're all juggling a lot. And we're trying to, on top of all that, in top of that human aspect of each of our team members, we need to balance their professional needs, our client needs. We need to budgets and timelines, and there's so much to do. So I want to say that we get it. This isn't always easy, and sometimes things get overlooked. Sometimes things with responsive, it's not until near the end that you go, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that on this such and such a phone and such a browser, this didn't work. Same can happen with the screen reader that, oh man, we didn't see, or we didn't check for this. Yeah, there's a lot going on. And the idea isn't to ever make it perfect, because as any manager knows, no project ever goes exactly perfectly. They can go well. They can be huge successes. We all have fantastic teams, really genuinely awesome people. And I am humbled by their greatness. However, nothing always goes exactly to plan. So what we're going to do is try to go ahead and break this down to make it easier to fit into what you're already doing, so that it does become more natural, so it does become more of just what's done in the overall evolution of the project. So first thing we do, we plan. I love planning. It's fun. But building accessibility into your planning process is going to be the easiest thing you can do in terms of the success of your team. The image is just showing all the rainbow and ruby slippers of the yellow brick road. And it's a long path. And this is the pretty fun part, because you can start going ahead and setting people up for success from the beginning. And the first thing is to make sure that every stage of a project lifecycle, accessibility is included in the definition of done. That means ideally, nothing is ever shown to a client that wouldn't be accessible when built out. That goes wireframes. Personas should be fully inclusive, and that means that they should represent the entire audience, including people who may use accessibility features on a site. The definition of done at every stage, it's not just the developers, it's concepts, it's styles, it's design, it's imagery, it's inclusion. Every stage, the definition of done should be inclusive, including accessibility. It's just how you define success from the beginning. But how do we do it, right? So easy to say this. So easy. I'm sitting here behind a Zoom camera saying all these things, go team, right? Yeah. So here's the scarecrow, like, yeah, how? All right, first we ask a lot of questions. One of the best teachers for project management course I ever said, told us all to go home and watch Columbo because the guy asked foolish questions, but those questions led to other questions that led to other things. So by asking all the questions, even the silly sounding ones, not being afraid to do the whole vulnerability thing, ask all the questions. So that way you can make sure that it's being accounted for. It's so much easier to have somebody say, yeah, don't worry about it. We got you. Than it is to figure out later how you're going to go backwards and make it happen. Build things into your estimations in your timelines and forecasting. So we're going to go a little bit more into each of these areas now. So let's think about our questions. In the strategy phase, you might want to ask about inclusive representation in your personas. Maybe look at the personas and see, are there any demographics which would benefit from maybe throwing in some AAA considerations? Maybe your target is WCAG 2.1 AA compliance. However, there's one of your target markets that's individuals, 60 or over. Looking at demographics and looking at statistics. Once each of us get to 60, I'm going to be darn lucky if these glasses are the only thing I'm concerned about. And all of us are the same. It's just natural aging process. We're all temporarily abled. So think about what additions, what wonderful things can you build in or bake into it from that persona portion, and what considerations would those personas not only benefit from to be compliant or conformant, but to actually have a thriving user experience. So design. There's some great tools out there. I'll show one later on about looking at brand colors. What is accessible? What isn't? What combinations can you make? What recommendations should be made for maybe a different use case? Looking at those designs. How about target sizes, line spacing? The previous talk, Dennis talked about, the mouse accessibility. Awesome. Look at this in your wireframe stage. Start planning for it right early. So it's never a question of later on of, oh, we need to go back and then development. I always see the biggest questions coming from third-party services. And, is the JavaScript working in such a way? Or have we put in ample time for accessible quality assurance throughout the process? What kinds of testings does that include? Is there screen reader testing available or some other type of quality assurance we can put in to make sure the accessible user experience is a quality one, not just a conformant one? So let's look at our personas. DisabilityStatistics.org has a very cool tool. It is based off United States, caffeination break. Thank you. Okay. It is based off the United States Center for Disease Control, or CDC, information. I will say that only includes binary genders. It only includes defined races. There are some very non-fully exclusive aspects to this tool, and that is the disclaimer. However, if you're looking for general statistics, if you know that a persona identifies as male, or if you want to have all gender to be fully inclusive to all individuals, if you are using a US market and you just want to get a feeling of how can I back this up to somebody who's maybe questioning if this is important, this is a good tool to lean on. So for example, I threw together a picture of the professor here from Wizard of Oz, and, name Professor Marvel, which, to be honest, I never knew before putting this deck together. Age 68, occupation, fortune teller, of course. Marital status, we're guessing single. Household income, we're going to say small, just because we see him, it's a lot of assumptions based on a movie made decades ago. Please bear with me. And then we say hobbies is a ASL meetup organizer. We don't know the whole story there. We don't need to. We don't need to know if this individual identifies or if they're a stakeholder or what. We do know that if they're familiar with ASL, that they are going to be more aware of needs in that area of auditory needs. I'm not saying this is 100% solid. I'm saying this is giving representation to individuals who do not meet a kind of cookie cutter approach to persona development. Brand colors. There's a million tools. They're all awesome. If you want to look at all of a brand palette at once, I like 8shapes.com. Again, there's a million ones out there. If I'm doing a spot check, my go-to is the WebAIM contrast checker, but there's a million out there. Really, find one, find your favorite. I like this one because I can dump all of the brand colors in at once, and it tells me does not pass. That's the DNP in red. It tells me AA18, which means that it would pass AA compliance at, or 2.1, WCAG 2.1 AA compliance at 18 point or higher. It has AAA to let me know it would pass at that level. It's got a lot of really cool things baked right into the process or into its service. So that way you can take a quick look at a color palette and say, this is good, and this maybe not so much. Next is forecasting and road mapping. A fun sign here pointing to Emerald City, Munchkin Land, the Witch's Castle, Poppy Fields, Kansas. We're already working as managers, and whenever we're forecasting or road mapping out, we're already trying to account for unknowns. We're already doing guesswork or, guesstimation, and we're already trying to put in buffers and try to, decide if something is scope creep or maybe just a different way of talking about the same thing. We're already dealing with a lot of big question marks. One of the things I found easier is if you can start to really get to know the humans on your project team. That is the biggest key for me for this. It's not only about holiday or vacation schedules. It's knowing, okay, this person is going to have a connection with me, and they're going to feel more comfortable being vulnerable and saying, oh, I don't know this, or, oh, I don't know how long this is going to take, or, oh, I need to research that. Can I have 3 more days before and get back to you? Promoting that trust internally and building those relationships and that human connection will help you identify potential pitfalls for all of your project, but it includes accessibility issues or concerns or appreciation. You're working with humans who don't necessarily know the answer, and you don't know either. So working together and having that fostering that relationship and building that trust is going to help you do that. But whatever you do, you're already building roadmaps and forecasts and all of these things. Just bake in the extra time if it's needed. Some things don't really need extra time. You're choosing colors. Maybe it doesn't. The brand colors are already really good in terms of contrast and usability and perceivability. Maybe it doesn't need a lot of time, but maybe there's a special mega menu system that isn't great for keyboard accessibility right off the bat, or keyboard navigatability. I think that's right. Anyway, whatever their issue is, start thinking in terms of that now so you can build extra time into your sprints. And with that comes back to those estimations, because it doesn't have to be scary. When you're talking about those sprints, when you're talking about that roadmap, think about that estimation on the kind of granular scale if you need to. If there's a big piece that's a big question mark, then definitely think that through into the estimations. If something has to be reworked or retested, again, back to that quality assurance aspect with your QA. If If that's an area of concern, go ahead and allow the extra time. So when we build things into the current plan, into what you're already doing, if you're building into your current sprints, all of that, we don't have to add extra milestones. Accessibility, again, is just respecting another user set, or maybe it's being aware of the fact that you're respecting the current user set, the ones you already have, because frankly, it's probably more that than the other. Watch out for flying monkeys and give me a second for more caffeine. Thank you for your patience. All right. So flying monkeys, every project has something. There's always going to be something that comes in, whether it be a curveball, an opinion you hadn't expected. There's always something, and accessibility is not any different. The good news is, with experience, we learn what to look for. So let's just talk about a few things in the realm of accessibility that we can look for at that management level, and ask questions of our team to say, well, has this been accounted for? So for example, the navigation. We all, when working on websites, we all spend a lot of time looking at the navigation, its layout. What words are we using? What are those feelings that are being or we're attempting to promote? What are all these things? But we'll also have to look at it from the usability standpoint. Forms can be challenging. There's always the labels, the ARIA, all of that. If your team has a lot of complex forms to build, to make them make sure they're accessible, maybe you want to add more QA time. Maybe your team does this all the time, so it's not a huge lift in terms of development. Okay, great. Get the QA time in there so you have the ability to do that. Headings and alt tags that skip to main content. So many sites, it's an afterthought. They don't design for it. They don't talk about it. Go ahead. Ask the question, how is that going to look? Where does that go? What does that do? Because it's really important, and I talk about this later too, to keep in mind that someone using a skip to main content is not necessarily someone who's incapable of visually perceiving your site. So having that consistent experience is vital. Obviously, carousels are not inherently accessible. I'm pretty sure people have been screaming that from mountains, so I won't take a lot of your time there. Obviously, is there a plan for captions or transcripts? Looking at a video, you can see this on a concept. Wait, that person's talking, where would the captions go? Wait, if you're just doing the transcripts, where those transcripts goes? Because it can't just be, well, the same idea is communicated next to it. It actually has to be that content. And then contrast, of course, can people perceive your content? Important things to remember. Very often, when people talk about accessibility, they go immediately to screen reader usage, which is vitally important. Do not get me wrong. However, it's not the whole story. There's all sorts of different ways people perceive the world around us. And that can be due to physical, or it can be due to cognitive. Or maybe a combination. It's really important to understand that, for example, if you're working on a higher ed site, you don't want a lot of extra motion and movement. 1 in 5 children are being diagnosed with ADD, ADHD, or somewhere on the spectrum. That's 20% of your audience is easily distracted and might not feel comfortable with all that extra unnecessary motion. I'm not saying don't use any motion ever. I'm saying think about how it's used, if it's necessary, and how it can be stopped. It's not only a visual concern. These are vital pieces for all of our audiences. Any testing is better than no testing. I'm very passionate about this. Do I think testing with native users is important? Yes. Give me the pom-poms, give me the sign, give me a flying monkey to swing around. I don't care. Yes, test with native users. Maybe before you get to testing with native users, though, you test internally. Like any testing is better than no testing. Maybe for whatever reason, your project just doesn't have this in your fortune telling. The crystal ball is not coming up with native user testing. Breaks my heart, but I understand that's a reality for a lot of people. At least test yourself. If you're on, I know JAWS is the most common one. They have great tools like JAWS Inspect and all of these things to help teams. But even if you're a project manager and you're sitting there on your MacBook, well, you know what? Your VoiceOver has a tutorial and you could at least do something. Anything is better than nothing. Just do something and plan for it. Again, native users all the way if you can do it. But if you can't, do something. And then inclusion matters, representation matters, and not tokenism, genuine inclusion. Sorry, little trigger happy there. When we see even mainstream media, including more people, I went up to, I was in front of an Old Navy last summer, and they advertised and all the models and what have you. There was every body shape and sizing, including some using assistive technologies in the physical world, some that were not, big, small, tall, short, seated or not, all of the above. Dove has these beautiful things out there. Xbox has a Super Bowl ad they ran, I don't know if it was last year, it might have been, a time ago. I'm still in COVID brain. I just recently told somebody before this started recording something about it being the 400th day of 2020. I don't know. My point is, a while ago, Xbox made a point to show their controllers so that everybody can play. It's inclusion, it's representation. And if you're not including your full audience, including those who may be using or may identify as disabled in some way, you need to include everyone. I mean, we're Inclusive Design 24 people. This is not going to be a shocker that I'm talking about this. Anyway, so move on. We got Dorothy meeting the scarecrow at the crossroads. There's no shortcuts. As a PM, you have a really good client relationship usually, or if you're a program manager, hopefully, or an account manager, whatever level you are. Even if you're some sort of architect, you're building that connection with your client, and you can tell them straight out, don't do the crow for a quick fix. Don't go for the overlays. Truth be told, they're typically very ableist, which is ironic and sad that people are thinking that they can be compliant by putting in a JavaScript. That sometimes gets turned off because people are using assistive technologies. Or maybe it's only dealing with the visual issues or what have you. They're not a good idea. I'm trying to be very polite here. Overlays are not a good idea. They're ableist. They're not stopping lawsuits if that's what people are looking for. And they're not showing the respect. It comes back to that respect thing at the beginning. You see individuals who have needs, not special needs, but needs that might be different than what I use. They're not special. They're just different. Somebody with different needs already has solutions. We don't need to give them new solutions. We need to respect them for this so that the solutions they're already using work. Okay. Given this audience, I probably shouldn't go off on my soapbox, but having a quick fix in a JavaScript to solve all the issues is not realistic. It's a lovely daydream. We have Dorothy leaning against the hay, daydreaming off about, somewhere over the rainbow. But there isn't a rainbow here. This is just an overlay, and that doesn't work. So advocate for patients. A lot of people feel really rushed. We see timelines. We see huge projects, and it looks like a long time to get them done until you break it down to the actual work. And oh my goodness, people need to move fast. And that's wonderful. And that's great. And it's exciting. And go team, except we need to advocate for patients. We need to stop and think. We need to not only do things like the normal management thing of, oh my gosh, is my team going to explode? Or how many hours are people going into this? And all of that, all of those human management concerns. But we also need to advocate for patients when it comes to accessibility. That'll help us argue with the whole no quick fix thing. Stopping, thinking, strategizing, and educating from this management or perspective will help you build that understanding with a client that maybe doesn't have that perception yet, or that perspective yet. The idea isn't about checking any boxes. Oh, I'm accessible now. Check. It's about creating fantastic digital experiences for all of the users. But stakeholders sometimes have a lot on their mind, and sometimes it's hard to talk to them about this. People, that's actually a perk of growing up as the only non-disabled person in my household, because I've stopped. It's not awkward. It's just life, right? But a lot of people feel that it's really awkward to talk about individuals who might be disabled. No, they're individuals. We all have challenges. We all have different perceptions. This is nothing new. This has been what humans have been dealing with since humans were around. So it doesn't have to be awkward, but it does have to be professional and respectful. And the first way to do that is to go right back to assuming positive intent. We need to assume that our stakeholders, even those that may not be promoting the most accessible, or not promoting, but prioritizing accessibility the way maybe it should be, it doesn't mean that, they are trying to be exclusive. It might mean that they're juggling a lot and they're concerned about other things, and they don't understand how they can have the best of both worlds. And that's where, again, we strategize, we educate, we do all of that stuff. So the first step with that, a friend of mine years ago with one of my talks went to me, he's like, oh, I know how to sum up your talks. They all go empathy, empathy, empathy. Sadly, Chris, you're right. So here I am speaking about empathy again. We have to consider that what the stakeholders' pain points are. And it's not just done during a sales process. It's a genuine need throughout every stage. And their pain points, and maybe why they're deprioritizing accessibility, those are valid concerns. Now that we may not appreciate their approach, we may need to educate in a different way, or sway them in a different way of looking at it, give them new perspective. But their concerns are valid. Their fears are valid. And we need to appreciate that, because they're managing budgets. They're managing their own internal timelines. This project timeline that you're working on, or this overall relationship timeline you're working on, is a very small piece of a much bigger puzzle. There is so much going on in an organization that if you're helping with a website, or you're helping with a this, and you're helping with a that, you're helping with this one small piece of this bigger thing. So we need to understand that when we say we need to advocate for patients, we may be impacting ad campaigns and print campaigns and someday in-person events. And all of these other things will get impacted by us advocating for patients. They have to understand how this works. Sometimes individuals live an experience that they aren't aware of how an inaccessible site really impacts people. And they need to understand that their users are already people who use assistive technologies. It's just whether or not they're respecting them or not. And then they also need to understand how staff will benefit. And more importantly, how it's not going to add a lot to their staff's already busting workload. Again, the whole world is understaffed right now. Everybody needs somebody. We need to show them how this streamlines, simplifies, and empowers people, and therefore is a positive use of their budget, is an effective shift in their timeline, is working with their users and empowering their staff throughout every stage. The stage. I clearly skipped the last caffeine sip. Sorry, my coffee love is well documented on all the YouTubes at this point. All right, so the thought is, though, approach talking to stakeholders with a practical sense of time, or with a very practical approach. And I say that because a lot of us, and I'll say for me, I shouldn't say us, I'll say me. I sometimes get passionate and want to just be like, just do it. This is the right way. These are people who need, all of your people need to respect, including this 20%. Just do it already. And, that just doesn't work as well as I want it to. The only person that sometimes worked with is my dog. And really, even she doesn't care. Seriously, that approach doesn't work. But bring it back to this streamlines, this addresses, this is your pain point. I hear you. I understand you. I understand your perception and where you're coming from. Let's make this meaningful. This is how we're best utilizing your budget. This is how we are best approaching your timeline, or we're shifting things to make sure we keep all of your other balls in the air too. This is how we're working with your team. This is how we're aiming to increase revenue. This is how we're empowering your group to do this. This is how it's future proofed. This. Talked about accessibility in business terms, not only in technical terms, and not only in what's right and what's good. Those are important. Those are so important. But when you're talking to very often individuals, and this is not all CMOs or marketing directors of marketing or any of that, but when you're talking to individuals at that more executive level, very often they're separated and they're just looking at those line items, and we need to empower them to make the choices and see the benefits of prioritizing accessibility. So this is a nice little picture of the farm back in sepia tone. What if you're already in Kansas? Because sometimes we inherit a site, or sometimes a site's adaptation has gotten put off due to, I don't know, a global pandemic or something. Could happen, just saying. Some things are going to come up, or maybe you missed it. Maybe something, timelines were going fast. Everyone was doing their best, but just something got missed. It happens. We're humans. We try not to let it happen. We actually have a pretty good success rate of not having it happen, but it's still going to happen sometimes. But very often we just kind of inherit an older site. Whatever it is, it's inevitable. Something's going to need remediation. So let's look at ways to help see that coming and adapt with that. So planning for the past. When you're onboarding a new client, whether or not, or inheriting an older site, maybe there's a merger or something, whatever it is, include a high-level accessibility assessment in that process. And when I say high level, I usually just do an automated sweep. Now, I know an automated sweep will only catch 25, 30%. It has false positives. There's all sorts of things wrong where you do not want to ever consider an automated assessment their source of truth. but it can help to see some red flags. If you do a quick wave test or a site improve test, and it's coming up all red, that's going to give you an idea. It's not a full assessment, but you're going to have a feel of what you're getting into sometimes. Look at those personas. Are they representative? Are they inclusive? Do they have all the individuals? If not, maybe this hasn't been something considered in the past. Take a look at the backlog. Look for the red flags there. There's certain things, and it's been years since I've been developer or that side of it, or a themer, but even I can see some red flags still. When you'll get a feel for that. I can't think of what a red flag in the backlog would be right now, to be brutally honest, except maybe a add skip to main content or something very simple like that. But take a look, see what's there. And then of course, legal awareness. If they don't have an accessibility assessment or other documentation acknowledging and promoting and showcasing their commitment, or maybe they just don't understand that legal aspect, there's that might be something. It's not, obviously the US is not far from the only country out there. It's globally being appreciated. The EU has their standards. I know Canada has Bill C81. There's so many out there, and we have global websites. We all do. So WCAG 2.1 AA will help us get a wide net out there and a lot of conformance going. Clicking our heels. So we want to just bring this home because we understand that all of this is evolving, whether it be our technologies in terms of building websites, it could be our technologies in terms of accessing websites or perceiving them. It could just be styles, new approaches, or new interesting things that are coming out on the web. There's ways to help future-proof. And the biggest one, I think, is content editor training. I have sat down at tables with more individuals who are absolutely fantastic content managers. They're writers, they're thinkers, they know their audience and really want to appeal to those needs, but they don't understand how some of what they're putting on the web impacts the larger groups, the larger overall user group. And they don't consider accessibility when doing it just because they don't have that exposure. That's not something they've specialized in. They've specialized in their area. Or in some cases, working with nonprofits, I've seen volunteers, fantastic, well-meaning, awesome volunteers come in, but they don't have that background either. Training your content editors will not only work with your site now, but it'll help to keep it more accessible moving forward. I've recommended before, have at least some rudimentary trainings in there and have some sort of acknowledgement or way to affirm that your users are in fact, or your editors are in fact able to keep things moving like that. Empower each of them. I mentioned before an accessibility statement, work with your stakeholders, work with their legal team, work with whomever you need to in that organization and find out what type of commitment to accessibility. Personally, the new whitehouse.gov one is very short, sweet, respectful, to the point. I personally like that one, but there's other good ones out there. It's just a matter of what you're comfortable with. Schedule periodic checks. Bake this into your timeline. Things happen. Drift is what I usually call it happens. Somebody's in a rush, somebody's this, someone's that. drift happens. So go ahead and schedule time for people to check in on it later. And then have leaders in your group, have team leaders take on the role of being that voice and asking those questions. Because sometimes maybe it's not appropriate for the manager to be always the one asking. Assign it other leaders, because more planning is going to make it so you're less balancing and much more baking it in. And finally, just our darling teams, a quick shout out to our wonderful teams we work with on the web. We want to make sure that what we're doing and all this planning is accessible to them too. So I have been known to be guilty of this before. Please do your best, work with your teams, but remember to turn on your captions when you're talking. When you're in Slack, Slack does not underline links. Bunch of sociopaths, apparently, according to Dennis's slide. Bold your Slack link. When you put a link in Slack, bold it too. It helps. And then make sure you leave space at the end of your calls for individuals to talk. Sometimes you have people who are beautiful, deep thinkers. Sometimes it takes people a while to be able to get their voice heard, or maybe they will need to be off camera in order to feel comfortable speaking. They have so much to contribute. Make sure you leave space for each of them. So, were there any questions?
Thanks so much, Donna. That was great. We do have a few questions. I think we have time for two.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned planning is very important. Do you have any suggestions about ways to encourage teams to think about accessibility early on in the process?
I often will ask questions. I will ask people to include it in the personas. Make sure make sure your personas are not ableist, basically. And I find that that's a quick way to have it waterfall down. So that way later on, when you're looking at all of your things, whether they be wireframes or whatever, don't have to say, is this accessible? You can say things like, hey, your John Smith would not be able to hear that. Where are the captions? And Amanda Crum here doesn't see this. So what are the color, and again, when I talk about personas, please, individuals, please, I'm talking about inclusive personas, not token. We don't need to have a persona that is the disabled persona. Your users are all the things. So your persona should be all the things too.
Thank you. Here's a question that I have personally. You mentioned issues with third parties, which I personally experienced. Do you have any recommendations for vetting third parties for their work on accessibility?
VPAT, am I saying that right? Oh my God, I'm pulling a blank because I'm like on camera here. Okay, thank you.
We've all been there, Donna.
Cool kid who brought the cool kid. All right. See if they have a VPAT. That's a good way of doing it. Or just test it out yourself. When people are giving you demos, test it. And make sure you look, sometimes you'll have to look at it pretty deeply. Like, for example, I know some Marketo forms, if you use an automated test, it fails them across the board. However, because of the Ajax, it will fill in ARIA labels as people are interacting with the form labels or new things are coming in code-wise. So you're going to really need to test it. But get in there and play with your demos. Get your hands dirty. Is there anything else?
Leonie, do we have time for one more question?
Yeah, I think we can squeeze in one more, can't we?
Sure. Here's a question. You mentioned that teams are often tempted to provide solutions because they want to help, but they're not necessarily the best solutions. How do you discourage teams from doing that without discouraging the team?
I think that happens outside of accessibility too. I'm just gonna throw that out there. So every manager is gonna have their own ways of redirection. Sometimes I ask dumb questions. Sometimes I just bring something up on my screen and leave it there. I have been told, frankly, my entire career that I am mom. So my personal style is I apparently mom people until they humor me. I don't know. Every manager is going to have their own approach to redirection, but I think the idea is to not treat it like something special. This is another piece of your ongoing project. This is not we need to have a special conversation any more than it is we need to have a special conversation about a meeting time. These are just another project consideration. This is another project consideration. This is just another way you're respecting your teams and your user base and your personas and your stakeholders. It all comes back down to that respect. And however your style is to address that, just go with it. Go with your gut.
That's great advice. Thank you, Donna. And thank you very much for your talk, The Wizard of Oz, and some fantastic and useful information. What's not to like? Everyone who's listening in, please head over to youtube.com/inclusivedesign24 and hit the like button. And why not subscribe to our channel while you're there? A reminder that Inclusive Design 24 is a respectful community, and we have a code of conduct that you'll find linked from every page of the ID24 website. And of course, ID24 this year would not be possible were it not for the generosity of Intopia, Fable, TPGI ARC, Adobe, Tetralogical, Intuit, InfoAxia, the Center for Inclusive Design, Web Directions AAA Conference, Adrian Roselli LLC, and CanAccess. Thank you to all of you. And we will be back on the hour with our next talk in Inclusive Design 24 2021.